Boop. Happy Wednesday, and today for Wesley, or Bible readings with Wesley Bible readings, I don't know. Anyway, today, April 1st, 2020, not doing April Fool's jokes. I don't know if anybody's really in the mood for it. I haven't noticed. Usually on Facebook, there's tons of them on April Fool's Day. I haven't seen that many. So I'm not going to worry about it. But anyway, today we're going to talk about Jeremiah 32, verses 1 through 9, and 36 through 41. And the whole list, if you want to see that later, I won't read to you everything that's on it. But you can look that up on our Facebook page. It's on our Instagram account, stuff like that. And you can go and read everything if you haven't already for today. But I titled this one today, The Speculators. So let me tell you a little bit about the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a prophet to the southern kingdom of Judea. So you're probably wondering what I mean by southern kingdom. I'm not talking about East Tennessee, everything south of Knoxville. No, what I'm talking about is in the history of the Hebrew people, you enter a time of the kingdom, and that is born under Saul. God takes the kingdom away from Saul, gives it to David, and then that kingdom of Israel sees its height under David and his son Solomon. Well, they're kind of disobedient too, and Solomon in particular, even though he was this incredible, wise king, he really messed up in a lot of ways. You can read that if you go back and read 1st and 2nd Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, all that stuff. Hear all about them and their family drama. But because of that, God takes the kingdom and takes most of the tribes away from the throne of David, and you have a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. And the southern kingdom is basically the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and they are based out of Jerusalem. And so they go on like that as these kind of two separated brothers who get along with each other at times. At other times they don't get along with each other. It seems like the only thing they really have in common is their disobedience towards God and their idolatry. If you read the prophets, once again, go back, read Kings and Chronicles, and you'll see a lot of that. So anyway, long story short, the northern kingdom is kind of destroyed by the Assyrians, who are the big dog on the block, big kid on the block, whatever. Anyway, they're really important, really powerful. But then this other power called the Babylonians rises up, overthrows their Assyrian overlords, and then they start taking over all the territory. So the northern kingdom had already been decimated by this at this point that Jeremiah comes on the scene, and just leaving the southern kingdom of Judea. Somehow they missed out on all the Assyrian fun, but they were still kept up to the same shenanigans that they had been doing this with their brothers to the north. And Jeremiah is the prophet that God calls to speak to the kings of Judea. And the message he has is not really popular. The message is that God's fed up with your, let's just keep using the word shenanigans. And he's going to take the land away from you, and he's going to send you into captivity. And so when the Babylonians show up here, don't bother fighting them. It's a battle you can't win. They are not just here because they thought it would be fun. They're here because God sent them. God is mad. It's something you did. And so because of this, you can imagine this doesn't go over really well, this message. If you're the king of Jerusalem, the king of Judea, and you've got this Babylonian army encamped outside your gates, laying siege to your city, you really don't appreciate this prophet going around and saying, "Thus saith the Lord," stop fighting. Just go, let them have the city, and then just deal with what God is going to hand out to you. So that's where we find Jeremiah here. King Zedekiah has imprisoned Jeremiah, basically for speaking the word of the Lord, that God has given Jerusalem over the Babylonians, and the king Zedekiah will be, this is where it gets really bad, part of the message is also that very specific about what will happen to King Zedekiah. King Zedekiah will be captured, imprisoned in Babylon for the rest of his life. If you want to know exactly how that all shakes out, you can go to 52, Jeremiah chapter 52, and read all that story. So anyway, when we get to this chapter 32, beginning in verse 1, we find out that Jeremiah is in prison, and he gets a message from the Lord that his cousin's going to want to sell him a piece of property. And sure enough, his cousin shows up and wants to sell his farm, wants to sell the family farm. And he offers it to Jeremiah, who's in prison, which is interesting. So I'm not sure what his motivations were. I mean, it could just be that Jeremiah's cousin was awoken in the middle of the night and, had this urge to sell the property, didn't know why, or God told him, go see your cousin in prison and sell him the property. My suspicion is that the Babylonians are encamped outside the gate of Jerusalem, and he's looking at what the reality is, and he's thinking, okay, the Babylonians are that way, so I'm going to go that way, and I need cash. I'm going to sell my property. Jeremiah is next to kin, has to right of refusal, kind of has his responsibility to buy it. I'm going to go see if I can talk him into buying this property so I can get the heck out of here. That's my suspicion of his motivation. I could be entirely wrong. It's happened before. So anyway, he goes to Jeremiah and says, hey, you're my cousin. You have the right of refusal on this, so I want you to buy my property. And the cost, I'm going to make you a deal, 17 shekels of silver. And so Jeremiah buys it. He buys it in spite of this Babylonian conquest. He buys it in spite of the coming exile that he knows because he's been preaching it. And he pays, what did I say, 17 shekels of silver? I think I got that wrong. Yeah, 17 shekels of silver. So for some reason I wrote 37 here. Anyway, 17 shekels of silver. And he signs the deed. He and more importantly, he does exactly like the Lord asked him to. He signed the deed, hands it over to his friend and scribe Baruch for safekeeping, tells him to put it in a nice stone jar somewhere and put it someplace really dry and really safe so that it will last, in his words, a long time. And he does all this in front of witnesses. But the thing is, even Jeremiah is a little concerned and confused by all this. The text isn't included in here for today, but it's in that gap in between verses 1 through 9 and then where the reading for today picks up in verse 36. So if you keep reading through that, you see this prayer that Jeremiah prays to the Lord. And at the end of his prayer, he says, so tell me why, Lord God, that you said, buy this field for money and make sure there are witnesses when the city is under Babylonian control. That's basically what he asked the Lord. He's like, I know that you are God, and I trust you, and I know that the people of Judea have done horrible things. And he said, but I don't understand why you're having me buy this property when this is the reality that I can buy this property, but the Babylonians are going to own it. I'm not even going to be here to live on it. Why are we doing this and on the face of it, times are so bad and so dire? Jeremiah isn't even really sure why he did this. He just did it because God told him to, and he was going to be obedient. So God responds, and he basically says to Jeremiah, look, there's a new time coming. The people of Judea have done all this stuff. Everything that you said, they've been disobedient. They've been idolatrous. They've done horrible things. They not only were they idolatrous, but it talks about them sacrificing their children to this thing called Molech in the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is a valley outside the walls of Jerusalem at the time. It's an important name because it shows up later on, and you're going to hear about it here during Holy Week. But he says, no matter all of that, there is going to be a time, and that time is going to be marked by restoration and purpose and promise. And he says that once again, people will live in this land, and they will buy and they will sell property, and things will be back to normal. Now, why is this an important message for today? It's just timely that this is, like I said, the lectionary is readings that were set up years ago without any real consideration of what things might be like, but the truth is eternal. And I've been thinking about this text a lot because besides everything that's going on in the world right now in, April 1st of 2020, there's a lot of things that are facing the life of the church. And sometimes it can feel like, why even bother? Why sign the deed when I don't even know if I'm going to be here tomorrow to live on the land? But the thing is that a lot of the things we do with an eye towards the future are like Jeremiah signing the deed for this property. And Jeremiah wasn't going to live on. I'm not sure how old Jeremiah was at the time he signed this deed, but the people were in captivity in Babylon for... Babylonian captivity was about at least 70 years, right? I'm pretty sure he didn't make it. Pretty sure, actually, he died in Egypt. Not that he wanted to go, but they didn't give him a choice. So a lot of the things that we do with an eye towards the future, but if it was just us and what we understood and what we knew, we would be like Jeremiah and we would be saying, what's the point? But at the end of the day, if we trust in God and we have faith in God, even though we don't understand what he's planning or what the future that he has planned is going to look like, we still do it out of obedience and hope that God can be trusted and is trustworthy. So at the end of the day, you got to go about your life, and you've got to live your life today with an eye for a future that God has planned and is moving us towards. I don't know any specifics. You don't know any specifics. The only thing I can tell you is that God is a God who tends to work towards a time of restoration and purpose and promise. So anyway, cheers to you. Go drink some coffee or whatever your favorite warm beverage is, and think about the word of the Lord. Goodbye. Boop.